Critical Role's new live show goes completely off the rails, D&D fans hate the new Hexblade subclass, and we bring you a spoiler-free review of the brand new Ravenloft novel.
And I love all the letters flying around on the screen, those are interesting.
Welcome to Fantasy News Friday on the Character Sheet. And before we dive into D&D outrage and Critical Role live show insanity, why not take a second to hit those like and subscribe buttons to help us keep growing the channel? It's free and we'd really appreciate it. And then, let's dive into the news. Critical Role took to the stage in Chicago for their first live show from their world tour in what would be the most chaotic, unhinged, and at times, completely not an actual play show in their history so far. While the show did start off with some updates for all three parties of the Critical Role campaigns, with Matt finally adding in those consequences for Bell's Hell's actions at the end of Campaign 3, as we cut to them being hunted down by the forces of the faithful and fleeing Vasselheim with powerful enemies hounding them the entire way, that quickly turned into what would start out as a bizarre series of game shows and improv games for the first half of their live special. The cast was playing characters voted on by the audience, so for Marisha's case, for example, they picked between Keyleth and Bo, and in a move that should shock no one, the audience picked almost entirely Mighty Nine characters, with only Travis as his beloved Grog, and Ashley as Fern, the only character she played for a full campaign, coming from outside of the Mighty Nine. What ensued was everything from drinking contests to blindfolded Pictionary and even a dance contest where we found out that Critical Role CEO Travis Willingham could not only twerk and moonwalk, but he could also do the worm. All with Robbie Daymond serving as their demented MC who controlled the pocket dimension this game show took place in. The second half turned into a boss battle and kind of got back on the actual play track, with Matt acting as the helper to Robbie's MC and with some dark, sinister force pulling the strings behind the scenes for both of them. But as in most Critical Role boss fights, some bad rolls by the DM, or in this case the MC, and the fact that it's almost impossible to balance a single foe against a bunch of level 20 adjacent characters made it largely just another one-sided beatdown, although it did have some truly funny moments. Robbie even paused before the final round of combat to deliver a pretty heartfelt speech about the origin of Critical Role and why the cast does what they do and why the fans mean so much to them that move the Critical Role cast to tears, before then returning to combat and getting pummeled and revealing that his character was just a normal man from Hebron, Illinois who had found a cursed artifact and who Robbie played with a deep southern accent for some reason. So all in all, there was almost no cohesion. There were massive spiritual traveler-shaped dicks, and half the show wasn't even an actual play, but the fans and the audience seemed to love it. That said, we hope this is not an indicator of how kind of slapdash and random the rest of the world tour will be, as this feels like it should probably stay as a once-in-a-lifetime experience for multiple reasons.
Compelling and rich.
The new Ravenloft novel, Heir of Strahd, comes out in just a few days, and we were given the chance to read the book ahead of time to give you our thoughts on this new D&D novel. When it was first revealed, based mainly on the cheery disposition of the party members shown on the cover art, we and many others were worried that it might be toning down or eliminating a lot of the horror elements of Ravenloft and of Strahd himself. But having just finished the book this weekend, we can safely say that both D&D fans in general and Ravenloft fans in particular will find a lot to love in the new book. The party does in fact have at least one overly cheerful member, but the evolution of that character over the course of the novel, as all that cheer and positivity begins to crack amid all the horror and the violence and the darkness they find as guests in Strahd's domain, becomes one of the most compelling parts of the entire book. Without delving into spoilers, the arc of that character becomes crucial to the ending, and seeing them sort of slowly wilt under the unrelenting horror and terror inflicted on them and their party by Strahd gets more and more compelling as you keep turning the page. This is not some sugar-coated version of Ravenloft. This is a place full of undeath, curses, and being forced to make terrible choices just to survive. And this party of strangers thrown together by fate have a pretty realistic reaction to finding themselves in this dire situation together, despite having no previous bonds or knowledge of each other. The ending of the book in particular just had us completely hooked. So for those D&D fans and horror fans out there looking for a new fantasy novel to pick up, we suggest you check out Ravenloft, Heir of Strahd, when it comes out next week on May 13th.
Check this out.
Heroes of Might and Magic, the iconic role-playing computer game that has been entertaining fans for decades, is finally getting its own TTRPG system, as Modiphius has launched and already funded the new Heroes of Might and Magic role-playing game Kickstarter this week. The new game will feature a system based on rolling 2d20s instead of just one, like in your standard D&D based system, and will feature 14 different lineages, their version of sort of a hybrid of race and class, from the world of Heroes of Might and Magic to choose from. And unlike most standard role-playing games, you start out as the leader of a huge faction and the commander of your own army, with every unit from the games available to the various factions you can choose to lead. This is a role-playing game about building up not just your one heroic character, but building up the entire faction they command to make army battles easier, to acquire more territory, and ultimately to become the ruling force across the land. So if you want an RPG system that balances heroic combat with full-scale warfare, all set in the much-loved world that Heroes of Might and Magic has been crafting for 3 full decades, go check out the Heroes of Might and Magic Kickstarter today.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
And finally, D&D has released 8 new horror-themed subclasses this week, as we've covered in a previous video, and all as a potential hint at the return of Ravenloft for their secret October rulebook release. But fans are already pretty upset at the way they've handled the beloved Hexblade subclass, after cutting it from the core 2024 rules. Basically, this new version of the Hexblade, once almost certainly the most popular subclass for Warlock, seems to have forgotten the blade part of the Hexblade abilities entirely. All their new abilities are focused around their hexes, which are now also concentration spells, by the way, which is another issue fans are not happy with, having seen how that's completely hampered the new Ranger as well. But the big letdown is that you no longer gain the ability to attack using your charisma score with your chosen blade, and you don't even gain proficiency with martial weapons, medium armor, or shields anymore, vastly limiting what you can even equip in the first place. Basically, if you wanted to play forward from the Mighty Nine in this new rule system, you just can't. It's functionally impossible. And all of the cool abilities that made a Hexblade a dangerous melee attacker with a unique bond with their blade have effectively just vanished. And D&D fans have been incredibly vocal about hating these changes, even demanding they simply change the class name to Hexer and remove Blade entirely from the name, since it's so radically different from the previous version of the much-loved subclass. Honestly, we would agree that turning a melee-based magical class into a frailer, more spell-oriented class that is constantly hampered by reliance on one key concentration spell seems like a pretty bad move by the D&D designers. But hopefully, with all this negative feedback pouring in during the playtest, the devs will get their act together and give fans an actual Hexblade subclass by the time the playtest finishes, or just make this class something else entirely. And that's all we have this week for Fantasy News Friday. Let us know what your favorite segment was down in the comments, and don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons.